What if the choices you make were never really yours? Every day we make decisions: what to eat, who to trust, where to go. We feel in control. We feel free. But philosophers and scientists have questioned this sense of freedom for centuries. In the 18th century, thinkers like Spinoza and Laplace proposed a deterministic universe, one where every event, including human thought, follows unbreakable laws of cause and effect. If that's true, then every decision you make was set in motion long before you were born. But it gets stranger. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet ran an experiment. He measured brain activity before people made conscious decisions. The result? Their brains decided before they became aware of their choice. The impulse came first, and the feeling of choosing came after. So if your brain acts before you do, who or what is in charge? This is the beginning of a deeper question, not just whether we are free, but what freedom even means in a world governed by atoms, neurons, and patterns. And if we aren't truly free, can we still be responsible? Imagine you're standing in front of two doors. You feel free to choose either one, but what if the choice you're about to make is already written, not in a book, but in the wiring of your brain? This is the world of determinism, the belief that everything in the universe, including your thoughts, decisions, and emotions, is the inevitable result of prior causes. If your environment, genetics, childhood, and even the last few seconds of brain chemistry determine your choice, is there anything left for you to decide? Modern neuroscience supports this. Brain scans can often predict what decision a person will make seconds before they consciously make it. Some researchers now believe the feeling of free will is a post hoc illusion. Your brain acts and then invents a story about why you chose it. But even if the machine is complex, even if it's you, does complexity equal freedom? Or is free will just a comforting myth? A story we tell ourselves to feel less like passengers? This question haunts not just philosophers, but scientists, judges, and ordinary people facing moral choices every day. Because if we're not in control, what becomes of praise, blame, and justice? Some say, even if the universe is determined, I still feel like I'm choosing. Isn't that enough? But let's pause. Feeling free is not the same as being free. Think of a chess computer. It can calculate, evaluate, even choose the best move. But is it free, or just following code? Now, apply that logic to the human mind. Your thoughts arise from electrical signals, chemical reactions, and evolutionary programming. Your likes and dislikes, fears and values, all shaped by forces you didn't choose. Do you choose your preferences, your impulses, your memories? The philosopher Galileo once said, "Nature is written in the language of mathematics." If so, and we are part of nature, then maybe we too are equations. Complex, emotional, but predictable. Yet something inside us resists this idea. We want to believe we're more than just neurons and algorithms. We want our love to mean more than chemicals, our regrets to mean more than code. Is that hope itself a kind of freedom, or just another output in the machine? The illusion of choice may be the most persistent illusion of all. But if it's an illusion, it's a powerful one. But what if determinism isn't the whole story? Some scientists argue that the universe is not fully predictable, thanks to quantum mechanics. At the tiniest level of reality, particles don't behave like billiard balls. They act randomly, uncertainly, unpredictably. Does that randomness give us free will? Not exactly. Randomness is not freedom. A dice roll is unpredictable. But it's not a choice. If your actions are random, they're still not yours. Still, this opens a door. If not everything is locked in place, if chance plays a role, then maybe, just maybe, not every thought is pre-written. Some philosophers propose compatibilism, the idea that free will can exist even in a deterministic universe. They argue that freedom isn't about defying cause and effect. It's about acting in ways that align with your internal values and desires. So maybe the question isn't, are we free? But rather, what does it mean to be free enough? Enough to love. Enough to regret. Enough to choose. Or at least believe we do. Maybe free will isn't a switch. Maybe it's a spectrum. If free will is an illusion, then why do we punish people? Think about it. Our entire legal system is built on the idea that people choose to do wrong, that they could have chosen differently, and therefore deserve blame. But if a person's actions were determined by their genetics, trauma, or environment, are they still guilty, or just unlucky? This is not a philosophical game. Real courts struggle with this. Some defense lawyers argue that brain scans show abnormalities that explain criminal behavior. Some judges reduce sentences when evidence of diminished choice is presented. Science is changing how we define guilt. But here's the problem. If no one is responsible, then nothing is fair. And if everyone is responsible, no matter their brain, their past, their wiring, then fairness becomes blind. We're stuck between two impossible options: a world where no one deserves punishment, or a world where compassion disappears. This is why free will matters. It's not just about philosophy lectures. It's about prisons, justice, forgiveness, and how we choose to treat one another. And if we ever truly accept that no one chooses freely, will we still be able to care? What if we've been asking the wrong question? Maybe the real issue isn't whether free will exists, but whether believing in it changes how we live. Studies show something strange. When people are told free will doesn't exist, they're more likely to cheat, lie, or behave selfishly. When they believe in choice, they tend to be more moral, more forgiving, and more motivated. So even if free will is an illusion, it might be a useful one, like money or language. It doesn't exist in atoms, but it shapes everything. Philosopher Dennett calls free will a user illusion, not real in the deepest physical sense, but real enough to build lives around. Maybe that's what matters. Not whether freedom is written into the laws of physics, but whether it's written into our relationships, our goals, our sense of meaning. Maybe we don't need absolute freedom, just enough to hold each other accountable, to dream, to grow, and to forgive. Maybe freedom is not a fact. Maybe it's a function, and functions can still work, even if we don't fully understand them. Let's turn the question inward. When you reflect on your own choices, do they feel free? You choose coffee instead of tea. You say yes when you could have said no. You forgive. You regret. You hesitate. These moments feel like freedom, like authorship. But where do these choices come from? Modern psychology shows how much of our behavior is automatic. We are influenced by lighting, by hunger, by background music, by the people around us. Our brains take shortcuts. We rationalize decisions after we've made them. And yet, you still pause before a hard decision. You weigh, you wonder. Is that moment of hesitation the seat of freedom? Some philosophers say yes, that within that brief pause between impulse and action, there's a space, and in that space lies human dignity. Because even if the universe is pushing us from behind, we can still resist, still reflect, still say, no, not that. I choose differently. Maybe that's what separates us from machines. Not control over everything, but the ability to question, even ourselves. Let's imagine a future without free will. What would society look like if everyone believed that choices were illusions? Would we stop blaming criminals or stop praising heroes? Would we stop telling stories about sacrifice, about courage, about redemption? Or would we build a different kind of morality, one rooted not in blame, but in understanding? Some thinkers envision this future, a justice system focused not on punishment, but rehabilitation. Schools that nurture behavior instead of condemning it. A world where empathy replaces judgment, because we know how fragile our wiring can be. But there's a risk. If no one is seen as responsible, powerful people could use determinism as an excuse. I had no choice. It was my upbringing. My brain made me do it. That's why this debate is so dangerous and so necessary. The more we learn about how humans work, the more we must decide what kind of humans we want to be, because knowledge can liberate, or it can be weaponized. And what we choose to do with that knowledge, well, maybe that is the truest test of freedom. Some argue that free will isn't found in the moment of choice, but in the ability to change. You may not have chosen your childhood, your genetics, or your first reaction, but can you pause, reflect, and grow beyond them? A person who once reacted in anger learns to respond with patience. A child raised in fear becomes a parent who chooses kindness. A generation taught to follow starts to question. Maybe that's freedom. Not the power to act without cause, but the power to transform the causes themselves. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre believed that we are condemned to be free, that even when the world pushes us, we must choose how to respond. That responsibility is terrifying, but also sacred, because if nothing matters, then nothing can change. But if we believe in even a sliver of freedom, then we have a duty to use it, to evolve, to break cycles, to choose better, even if it's hard. Maybe we don't control the first domino, but maybe we can choose what falls next. Some argue that free will isn't found in the moment of choice, but in the ability to change. You may not have chosen your childhood, your genetics, or your first reaction, but can you pause, reflect, and grow beyond them? A person who once reacted in anger learns to respond with patience. A child raised in fear becomes a parent who chooses kindness. A generation taught to follow starts to question. Maybe that's freedom. Not the power to act without cause, but the power to transform the causes themselves. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre believed that we are condemned to be free, that even when the world pushes us, we must choose how to respond. That responsibility is terrifying, but also sacred, because if nothing matters, then nothing can change. But if we believe in even a sliver of freedom, then we have a duty to use it, to evolve, to break cycles, to choose better, even if it's hard. maybe we don't control the first domino, but maybe we can choose what falls next.